Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Raleigh City Council meeting. Before we begin our work session, I just wanted to update everyone on the meeting that we held today with Wake County public health officials. We met to kind of look at the data and make a determination about where we are in terms of our mask mandate. And I just wanted to say, we're not there yet. When I considered relaxing the mask mandate in late November, our case transmissions were 85 per 100,000. Today, they are 1,005 per 100,000. In late November, our positivity rate for testing was 4%, and now it's 18.96%. Hospitalizations are dropping, but ICU remains at 97 to 99% capacity. Now, here's the good news. Everything is trending in the right direction. We have seen our positivity rates go down. We've also seen our caseload per 100,000 go down over the past 2 weeks. And we expect that to be the case over the next 2 weeks as well. Also, the CDC is reevaluating their previous criteria. That criteria was 49 cases per 100,000 and 5% positivity. Because the Omicron variant is different than Delta, they want to make some different assumptions and look at that. And they will be letting our Wake County public health officials know what that new criteria would be. We've heard a lot from people who have mentioned that states like California and New Jersey are getting rid of their mask mandate. One of the things that we talked about today was those states and other states have peaked earlier than we did. So their surge came in mid-December. Ours came in January. So even with that, California did not get rid of its mask mandate totally. They have gotten rid of a mask mandate for vaccinated people, which we all know that will be very difficult to enforce. And New Jersey has announced that it is getting rid of its mask mandate. However, they have not issued a date yet. So everybody is still monitoring the situation. We are going to meet in 2 weeks to look at the data and hopefully make a decision at that point. I know there's been a lot of interest from the public and also from the media on this and all of you. So hopefully that this will help. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll be looking at things and hopefully see new trends. So thank you, everyone. And now we are going to start our work session with a topic that I think a lot of people are very excited about, and that's tree conservation enhancements. And I believe Justin Mehta is here from Planning and Development to walk us through that.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of Council. Pat Young with Planning and Development. I'll introduce Justin here in a moment to walk through this proposed material, but wanted to first acknowledge and thank our partners in the City Attorney's Office and in Urban Forestry who helped put these ideas together, and thank you for your leadership. I think our goal here was to find ways to expand our urban tree canopy with development to continue to accommodate growth, but to ensure that we have a strong and robust and growing urban tree canopy. And I think that what you're going to see today meets that intent. So the team is available to answer questions, but right now I'll turn it over to Justin to walk you through this in a little more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, and good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. Again, I'm Justin Remetta with Planning and Development. As Pat mentioned, we do have a team of staff here from a few different departments that are available and hopefully able to answer any questions you might have on this topic. So we have prepared a three-part presentation for you today. It'll consist of just a brief recap of the discussion that's taken place to date, an overview of the existing regulatory framework in the UDO as it relates to tree protection, and then some short and midterm opportunities for Council's consideration for ways to expand tree conservation and replacement throughout the city. So as many of you know, this is a topic that was discussed several times back in 2020 at the Growth and Natural Resources Committee. That resulted ultimately in Council asking staff in November of that year to identify regulatory ways that we could expand opportunities for tree protection across the city. So the existing regulatory framework in UDO today consists of really three broad categories as it relates to tree planting or preservation. Those are the tree conservation rules, forestation requirements, and neighborhood transitions and protective yards. And I'll go into just a little bit of detail on each of those over the next few slides. So the tree conservation rules apply to sites that are 2 acres or larger. It's a preservation requirement that results in a tree save area equal to 10% of the site in most cases. In the R1 and R2 districts, that does bump up to 15%. The UDO lays out a very specific hierarchy of trees and groups of trees that are required to be preserved that an applicant or developer and staff go through in order to identify which trees on a site should be preserved. But these regulations are really crafted to preserve large stands of existing healthy trees that would not be impacted by a proposed development and does not contain any planting options or requirements. The forestation rules apply in the city's 3 water supply watershed overlay districts. The rules there consist of all lots in those areas needing a 40% forestation, and that requirement can be met either through the preservation of existing trees or the planting of new trees or both, or a combination thereof. And obviously in a planting scenario, there are requirements for size and species and such that those planted trees would have to be. This slide just shows some maps of those existing water supply watersheds. You've got a key map of the city's jurisdiction and the locations of the watersheds there on the top left, going clockwise. In blue, you have the urban or Richland Creek watershed in the northeast part of the city. On the bottom right, in green, is the Swift Creek watershed overlay, and in the bottom left, you have in orange the Falls Lake watershed. Neighborhood transitions are a requirement that applies when development is occurring in a mixed-use district adjacent to a residential district. Part of that transition area includes a landscaped yard, and that landscaped yard can consist of planted trees or preserved trees or some combination of both, provided all of them meet size, species requirements for to accomplish the screening objective. Protective yards are required for certain uses by their very nature, and those generally apply either at the street or along the perimeter of the property or both. And then finally, the last kind of planting or landscaping requirement is for parking lots and parking areas. They're required to have landscaped islands with trees planted in those as well. So as Pat mentioned earlier, staff in planning and parks have been in discussions, and we've also talked with the city attorney's office to go over the existing regulatory framework and the existing enabling authority we have from the state in which to regulate tree preservation. And we've come to the conclusion that the existing UDO does not fully take advantage of that enabling legislation. And just a few examples of that would be that we could require more than 10% tree conservation on any given site. And we also have the ability to regulate sites smaller than just those that are greater than 2 acres, as we do today. And one of the areas of concern that we often hear about is small lots in an infill redevelopment context. So oftentimes a site is smaller than 2 acres, and so the tree conservation rules don't apply. But the site does contain some potentially large stately trees that folks see as of significance, and they are not required to be protected due to the site being less than 2 acres. And it's kind of further exacerbated by the fact that there is no replanting requirement in that scenario either. And I did just want to point out at this point that the existing tree conservation rules do allow some alternative compliance means for secondary tree conservation areas. And that will be, we'll come back to that later on a future slide as we talk about some options. So with those, that framework and concerns in mind, staff has really identified 4 areas of potential consideration for council as it relates to tree preservation and replacement. One would be to basically apply the tree conservation requirements to lots that are 1 to 2 acres in size, so bump the threshold down from 2 acres to 1. Another option would be to explore some type of champion specimen tree provisions. Third would be to include tree planting requirements for smaller lots or lots that, for whatever reason, are not subject to the full tree conservation rules, but nonetheless would benefit from some type of planting or tree coverage on site. And then fourth would be to explore the resource management zoning district option as well. And I'll go through each of these in some brief detail too. So starting off with applying the tree conservation rules for lots 1 to 2 acres in size, the idea here would be to just leave the existing regulations in place as they are for sites greater than 2 acres, but also apply them to smaller lots that are between 1 and 2 acres. And those rules could be largely the same as the existing tree conservation rules, or they could be modified. So for example, to add some flexibility to allow a developer or homeowner to meet the requirements, there may be options to allow plantings to satisfy some portion of the requirement and to expand those alternates or alternate ways for one to comply with the rules. And so if that provision were implemented, this slide kind of shows potential impacts of that. We've identified somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,900 acres of land that is currently outside the watershed protection overlay districts that are between 1 to 2 acres in size, and that could potentially result in, as you see, 593 additional acres of tree conservation throughout the city, provided that's what the simple math of just using the existing 10% requirement, again, could result in nearly 600 acres of additional tree protection. Moving on to the specimen or champion tree ordinance, the goal with this option would really be to get at the scenario we talked about before, where there are maybe a smaller site, but it does have some significant trees that many might see as value and worth saving. So this scenario, we could explore ways that we could preserve trees on these sites citywide, regardless of parcel size or use, et cetera. And of course, as part of that, we could identify and define a list of trees that we would deem significant based on size, species, et cetera, and find ways to require preservation of those trees on a development site, or at the very least, if they must be removed for development, require some type of replanting or replacement elsewhere on the site. The third option would be just exploring some tree planting requirements for smaller lots. This is probably the simplest of the three. We could explore ways to simply just require at least some type of tree coverage on any lot being developed throughout the city, regardless of its size or whether it's subject to any specific tree conservation rules. So For example, you could require every lot to have a tree planted on it, or X amount of trees, or X caliber of trees, et cetera. And again, this is an area where we could identify preferred species or required species, just to make sure that we're getting the type of trees we want, both aesthetically and ecologically. And finally, the Resource Management Zoning District is a zoning tool. It would require, in addition to UDO text amendments, a rezoning of properties where we would apply this district. But the benefit here is that it does allow some really broad ability to regulate all aspects of trees and their removal, especially things like maintenance, grading, et cetera. So it does, it would provide some expanded opportunities to really more broadly obtain more trees throughout the city. Just wanted to mention there are some ongoing or recently completed initiatives, the Growth and Natural Resources 1.1 tree canopy study and 3.4 urban heat islands. We feel like there is some good data that could be mined from those initiatives to help us identify, if council wished to explore this option, where and if the resource management zoning districts might be useful. So next steps, at this point, staff is asking council for direction. Certainly you could ask us to come back with additional information on any of these topics at this point. Part of that additional information could include additional stakeholder input on any of these concepts. You could send to council subcommittee for further discussion, or you could choose to authorize any or part of the considerations we've offered you today. Obviously, everything we've mentioned would require a UDO text amendment, and once authorized, they would just go through the typical text amendment process, which includes a drafting and public and stakeholder input phase, followed by planning commission review and ultimately public hearings with city council. And so with that, we can take the presentation down. Again, we have several staff members here. We can hopefully answer any questions you might have of us.
Thank you very much. First, so Mayor Pro Tem Stewart's hand raised, then Councilmember Cox.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Rometta. This information has been long awaited, I know, by myself and Councilmember Knight with excitement. And I'm really thrilled with what y'all have brought to us today. We, in Growth and Natural Resources, as you pointed out, back in the fall of 2020, we're really looking for holistic citywide solutions to tree conservation. And I think it's really important that we find ways, as you laid out at the beginning of your presentation, or maybe Mr. Young said, to still do development, right? Like still have our housing needs met and protect the environment and do tree conservation. For me, it's all through the lens of climate change. So I think these are some really solid steps to help us get there. I would love to see the first three move forward, gather a little stakeholder engagement and start the text change process, and keep number 4 in motion, as you mentioned, with getting that additional data from the tree canopy study and the urban heat islands to inform how we would move that forward. But I'm quite pleased and eager to move.
Councilmember Cox.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I would like to make sure that it's in board docs. Did not have a chance to review it before the meeting, and it would be good to have it in board docs so that I can take a look at it and consider the recommendations that were presented. Some questions that come to my mind regarding trees are technical in nature. For example, what are the recommendations for species of trees that would be planted? I mean, obviously, these are things that would have to be considered as we move forward, and regardless of whatever policy is adopted. What are the water, nutrient, and sunlight requirements of these different species of trees? What sizes are optimal for planting the different species of trees? And what will we be doing as a city to ensure that once they're in the ground, that they get the water that they need and the nutrients that they need in order to ensure a successful outcome? And so simply putting trees in the ground, that's definitely the first step. But then maintaining those trees until they grow to maturity um, is another important question. Because it doesn't serve us any good if we put a bunch of saplings in the ground and 50% of them die. So, what is the plan for maintaining the tree canopy and ensuring that it grows and is healthy? So those would be the kinds of questions that I would like to see answered. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I want to second Councilor Stewart's comments. This is a very exciting proposal, and I think the level of response by staff is thoughtful, is comprehensive, and it shows a lot of foresight. So I'm really looking forward to working with the public and the staff to take this through the process. I think the main thing it'll do, it'll really increase the quality of life of the residents of Raleigh if we can get this done and get this right. A couple of comments. I do think we need to look at how we use the TCAs in terms of sizes of parcels, be they 1 acre, be they below an acre. I'm not sure if we should have different percentages that may discriminate towards buying a larger lot or subdividing. I think we maybe want to look at, I get the tiering effect, but maybe we have the same percentages for all sizes because it is a percentage. And why do we have a different percentage for a quarter of an acre versus an acre and a half? I think that's something we need to think about as we go through this to make sure we're not discriminating towards buyers or developers trying to work that system a little bit. Not that I think anybody would try to work the system, but that it may skew things towards one or the other. So let's think about that. I do think we need to think about also that may help this in terms of getting to percentages on parcels is an in lieu fee or fee in lieu system that may help make this maybe I don't know if it's make it simpler, but make it more workable for those that want to use it. I think that may be something we want to look at as we go through the process as well. So those are just a few things. And again, I think to Councilor Cox's, to try to limit the use of exotic species when we are replanting. We want to use what's indigenous, and really, we are the city of oak. So as much as we can stay with the oak family for all the reasons that we would want to plant and keep oaks, I think that would be awesome. And again, to Councilor Stewart's comments on this really will help us scale up Raleigh's response to climate change and really will help us lead in this area and with our responsibility towards responding and dealing with climate change. So again, I appreciate the work on the staff on this, and I look forward to working with everyone to get this done. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Branch.
Yes, thank you definitely for the presentation. Couple questions I have has a lot more to do with infill or redevelopment on property with trees. Other than a tree probably dying and of age, if someone wants to go in and, their house was built, everything's fine, they decide they want to extend their home or do some redevelopment, but it impacts the trees on their property. Does this policy touch that at all?
I think we've left it broad enough that it could, but it certainly doesn't have to. I think we'd want to talk closely with the city attorney's office just to make sure that when we're applying these rules, we're applying them at times and in areas where we have the ability to. So, for example, if someone's not doing any development or building anything on their property, I don't know that we really have ability to regulate that type of removal unless it's a certain type of champion tree. But I think as part of what we've laid out, that recommendation about requiring tree planting or preservation on small lots, that could include existing homes, or it could be you could also let existing development be and just require it on new construction. So there's a couple ways to go about that. We're not necessarily at this point recommending one or the other, but we could explore both options and bring you back more information on those.
Okay. And my last question is, I've seen cases where we've had rezonings and the property owners would go and they clear cut the property down to almost the bare minimum. But then it just sits there. Like there's the development. Like I know particular property in my district that this has happened on. Do we have any policies there and working with development? I mean, because some clear it for the sake of clearing it and there is no change. Does this touch any of that?
I know there are some existing rules in place with regarding at least folks having to restabilize the site for erosion control when if it's cleared and sits vacant for quite some time. But that's another area we could certainly look at as part of this. We do have requirements today for sites of, again, it only applies to sites 2 acres and larger, that prohibits the mass clearing of sites in advance of any development. So that's another option we could look at, requiring that type of protection for smaller lots as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have questions? Councilmember Melton?
On a question, I just wanted to say that obviously with any code change, it'll go through a very public process with different touch points with the public. And so, I'm supportive of moving it forward, let that process start. I think that some good points were raised in the meeting. I also think that this, the tree conservation issue, the replanting issue, at times is a bit of a tension point between our other goals of buildable land and the cost of housing. And so I want to make sure that we're being mindful of that as it works through the process as well. Because I think these are areas where sometimes the interests compete, but they're both very important points. Probably every event in person I've been to since on council, someone has come and talked to me about trees and tree conservations in the city of Oaks. So I do know that this is very important. So I would support moving it forward with the understanding that there will be opportunities to receive input and modify it as we go.
Any other comments? Well, I just want to compliment staff on the excellent work that went into this. And I really appreciate the fact that we had planning, parks, and the city attorney's office working together. The product certainly demonstrates a lot of thought that went into it. And I am going to echo what Mayor Pro Tem Stewart said and Melton, that I'm ready to move forward with this. And I know that during the process, there will be opportunities for public comment and input. But I just want to say thank you for some very good work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have the Lake Wheeler Road Improvement Project, an update on design. Here from Michael Moore and Kenneth Ritchie, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Kenneth Ritchie with Engineering Services, here today with Matt Clem from Planning and Development and Michael Moore from Transportation to provide an update on the Lake Wheeler Road design project. So for the presentation, we'll do a brief description of the existing conditions of Lake Wheeler Road between really 440 and South Street in downtown. A review of some of the design considerations, scope guidance, and the construction schedule, a discussion on the Raleigh Street Plan and Dick's Edge Study guidance, and then finish with the capacity and development impact questions section. So the existing conditions, Lake Wheeler Road is classified as a minor arterial. It carried approximately 7,300 vehicles per day in 2018. On the current street plan, it is listed as a two-lane avenue divided. Today, it is a two-lane undivided street between South Saunders and Maywood. It's a five-lane divided street between Maywood and 440. There is a split management of this section of Lake Wheeler Road. Raleigh manages Lake Wheeler Road from South Saunders to Centennial Parkway, and then NCDOT manages Lake Wheeler Road from Centennial to I-440. So with the design project, there are a few design considerations that we're trying to take into account. Most notably is the Duke Energy transmission easement and transmission infrastructure that runs on the west side along the Dix Park frontage. This is certainly one of the larger coordination efforts that we are having to undertake with this project. Those efforts have commenced with Duke and will continue throughout the design process. Additionally, the existing residential, the Fuller Heights neighborhood is on the east side, certainly trying to minimize the impact of the project on that neighborhood. There's a number of proposed development projects along this corridor that we are coordinating with from a standpoint of design. Pedestrian bicycle connectivity has been a big point of emphasis with the design, as well as coming out of the Dix Edge study. We'll provide some more details on that forthcoming. And two, have looked and identified potential roundabout locations along this corridor. So some of the scope guidance for this project, the city's comprehensive plan and street plan identify this section of Lake Wheeler Road as a two-lane avenue divided section. Through the Dix Edge study, feedback that has come as part of that effort have pushed for separated bicycle and pedestrian facilities along the western edge of Lake Wheeler Road, along the park frontage, and have identified a 6-foot sidewalk along the eastern edge of Lake Wheeler Road against Fuller Heights. Additionally, the Department of Transportation has done some intersection analysis and has identified potential roundabouts at Hamill Drive and Dal Adams Drive, or Dal Adams Street, excuse me. This is just some initial visuals that kind of depict the street plan in the Dix Edge study that show our two-lane divided with a planted or a concrete median, a proposed 6-foot sidewalk with a planting strip along the Fuller Heights, the neighborhood side, and separated pedestrian and bicycle facilities, a 12-foot bikeway, and a 10-foot pedestrian sidewalk along the park frontage. In addition, some initial kind of renderings of potential roundabout designs at Dal Adams and at Hamill. These designs will certainly be further vetted as we go through the design process. The cost estimating for this project, there are two estimates shown here. These are based off, and the differences between the two estimates are based off of estimates we've received for Duke Energy for either relocating the existing transmission infrastructure or minimizing the number of poles along this along the transmission corridor. The costs vary between 16.8 and 19.8 million. Option one would be a relocation of the transmission poles out of the proposed roadway. Option two would reduce the number of the transmission poles, transmission infrastructure along the corridor. The current estimate for survey design and utility coordination totals about 1.575 million. Back in early summer 2021, council did appropriate 1.5 million to initiate design on this project. Looking at the proposed project schedule, we have started some early design efforts on this project. We are anticipating and have scheduled this design to complete in about 18 months, which would have us starting construction the summer of 2023, with completion projected for the summer 2025. There would be about a year gap between the proposed opening of the Gibson Play Plaza and the completion of the Lake Wheeler Road project that we will coordinate with the park on as that comes along. And then looking at public engagement milestones, we did have a pre-design engagement period back in the fall of 2021. We will be back in front of council in the spring of 2022 with a full design contract award for this project. Our next public touch point would be a design public engagement in the summer of 2022, followed by a council presentation and condemnation authorization in the fall. and then pre-construction public engagement in the summer 2023 prior to starting construction. So next, I will hand it off to Matt Clem in Planning and Development to discuss the street plan and the Dix Edge plan guidance.
Thank you, Kenneth, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Again, I am Matthew Clem in Planning and Development, and I am the project manager for the Dix Edge area study. So I'll start by showing a slide of the Raleigh street plan, map T1 of our comprehensive plan, which identifies Lake Wheeler Road from South Saunders to Maywood Avenue as a avenue 2-lane divided street section. And this was the basis for some design alternative selections that we worked through with the Dix Edge area study community members. And so important to note about the street plan, the models that are used to plan for the network in these streets is based on not existing development and not existing zoning, but rather the envisioned zoning and development of the city's future land use map, which designates most of the study area as a regional mixed use designation. So envisioning urban intensities, tall structures, well aligned with those recent rezoning requests that you have approved up closer towards Western Boulevard. So the streets in this network are planned and anticipated to fulfill that land use vision. So just a quick update on the Dix Edge study timeline. We anticipate delivering the final recommendations of the study to council in the spring, as is indicated on this slide. And as an early implementation action and in coordination with other city projects, staff's identify the opportunity to utilize this ongoing engagement and implement the community preferred streetscape design for Lake Wheeler Road. Conversations with the community regarding the preferred outcomes for that design took place in spring 2021. So on this slide, you'll see another perspective of the community preferred streetscape. And this streetscape design takes into account other Dix Edge community concerns of providing safe and convenient travel along and across Lake Wheeler Road for people walking and biking. These concerns are addressed by adding sidewalks and bike facilities and by designing a 2-lane street section in keeping with the street plan map. And this 2-lane street section will help to moderate vehicle speeds, making the street safer for all users compared to a larger multi-lane section. And with that, I will pass it off to Michael to talk about capacity and development impact.
Thank you, Matthew. Again, I'm Michael Moore with the Department of Transportation. There has been some conversation in the community about, are we building enough street when we build this section of Lake Wheeler Road? So we wanted to be direct and answer some of those questions today. The slide you have before you is an indication of some of the major arteries into downtown. When you look at this, don't be misled by the arrows. These all point to downtown, but this is actually bi-directional traffic. And when you're looking at the black numbers that you see there, those are existing traffic counts in 2019. And when you look at the blue numbers associated with that, you can see that those are capacity based on laneage and roadway design. The purple dots, or purple squares you see there are some of the significant developments that are along the corridors along the south edge. So again, just to orient yourself, downtown is upper right-hand corner, and then the two sort of yellow crosshairs you see there are South Saunders heading to the south and the I-40 corridor going east and west. If we look at this a little bit more in detail, you can see that Lake Wheeler south of I-40 carries about 19,000 cars a day with a capacity of about 20, so it is approaching that number. As we approach Centennial Parkway and I-40, that number, capacity number is closer to 40,000. It's carrying about 20,000 cars a day. But then once we get past Centennial, you can see that the numbers drop considerably down to about 7,300, with a capacity of about 20,000 a day. So that tells us a lot of that traffic is using I-40 and Centennial Parkway.
and sort of peeling off to go those directions and not really quite making it all the way as a avenue or a pathway into downtown. So I thought it would be helpful if we could sort of see what a 2-lane divided and a 4-lane divided look like. And for the 4-lane divided, we don't really have to look a lot past, when we look at Dix Park, a lot past the front door there. Lake Wheeler and that section between Maywood and I-40 is already at that 4-lane divided with a median. Centennial Parkway, just a little bit to the west, you can see again as a 4-lane divided, and are quite broad and wide, can carry a lot of capacity, but make it very difficult for pedestrians and cyclists. By contrast, when we look at the 2-lane divided, offer a couple of examples here that we've recently completed. Sandy Forks Road that has a broad median that carries a lot of stormwater infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructure. And then if we look at Hillsborough Street, we also have a median. It's a little more narrow to kind of reflect some of the urban density that we've got on either side of that. But again, is able to carry a pretty good volume of cars and balance that need between the pedestrian environment. And just for reference, portions of Hillsborough Street right around here, around the university, carry about 17,500 cars a day. And again, balance that pedestrian activity with the need to for connectivity. So I think we've shared this slide with folks before, but you know, the 2-lane divided also gives us a capacity increase because we take some of the conflicts out of the way. When we do that with the roundabouts, we'll pick up just a tad more. So with that traffic volume of 7,300, given the capacity that exists, kind of freeboard above that today, with that increase, that would get us between 18,000 and 20,000 vehicles a day. So the question a lot of folks have, well, that calculates for today's sort of place and time, but what about as we continue to develop along the corridor? So we've worked very closely with Parks and the Dix team. We look at the Gibson Plaza play and the thought that it might pull 1 million visitors a year. And there's been also some other conversations about an anchor institution in the park carrying about 1 million million visitors a year. We worked with the Dix team. VHB, a local consulting firm, helped us with some numbers here. But if we assume that everyone arrives by car and there's 3 to 4 visitors per vehicle, that would generate between 1,300 and 1,700 trips a day. When we look up and down the street and we look at some of the developments that we know that are in process and are coming, at the top there you see Park City South. We took that number for 800 vehicles a day, using Lake Wheeler as their most direct access directly from their traffic impact analysis. The same with the Hamill Drive project. We took that directly from their traffic impact analysis. The other big one that you see here with the asterisk, just for clarity, that asterisk is to say if this particular rezoning, which I don't think is quite before you yet, on those Baker Roofing properties, if they use their full entitlement, that would generate another 3,000 cars a day. So when we look at all of these in total, we're looking at about 7,400 additional trips. And again, with that capacity of about 18,000 to 2,000, 20,000, vehicles a day, we do have a little bit of freeboard there with 5,000. So Matt spoke to this a little bit in his analysis when he was talking about what the street map was based upon. This is the regional model that we've used, and you can see here, it's hard to see, you can see very tiny numbers, but if we look at this, you can see that the 2050 plan anticipates, with the build out, that we're going to see about 17,500 cars a day. I want to talk about a couple of concepts here as we sort of wrap up. So let's take, for example, were we to build a 4-lane divided, I think most folks are familiar with this concept of induced demand, particularly where you create capacity on a desire line, like from outside the belt line, inside the belt line. We will develop a lot of capacity and reduce congestion, but we're going to see a lot of folks start to use that because it becomes the path of least resistance, and it will build right back up. We want to be cognizant of that as we're trying to create an environment adjacent to the park that's more conducive to pedestrians and cyclists, and maybe crossover traffic between development and homeowners and the park itself. An increased dimension for that cross-section also comes with some utility impacts and some other impacts on properties that we would like to avoid. So just to kind of wrap up here, just a couple things, considerations as we were considering what the cross-section would look like and taking that and sharing that with the Dix Edge study. demand varies. So a lot of the peak demand that we see for commuters only moderately overlaps or minor overlaps with those kind of peak demands for the parks. So we feel like that there's that the fear of congestion will be eased because those things don't quite kind of align to be all at the same time. Capacity, again, we have some freeboard there. The capacity in the street network that we have now is still greater than the maximum daily demand. Now, I say that does not necessarily mean that we don't see congestions at certain peak times at certain places. We'll probably always see that a little bit, but that congestion, again, is balanced against how the street operates for the remainder of the day and the time. Lastly, I just want to close with the proposal that we've got in the design right now is an attempt to try to balance the street design for that human environment that we want to create and that access and connectivity that we need to get in to new developments, to the park, and into downtown. So we tried to balance the functional with the aspirational, and I think this two-lane divided and the design concepts that we've presented and our work that we'll continue to work with the community to refine that will be that balance that we need. So with that, Kenneth, Matthew, and I are available for questions, and we're happy to answer those.
Michael, I just want to tell you that I had a meeting with some members of the Dix Conservancy today, and I know that you all presented to the Dix Leadership Committee on this topic, and everybody was saying what an incredible job you did. They really appreciated the data points that came out. They said they understood now why you are advocating for 2 lanes instead of 4 lanes. The images that you used certainly sent that message very strongly. They could see it, feel it, and they understood it. So they told me to pass on to you what a great job they felt you did, and they get it. So I want to say thank you to you and the staff for the time and effort you put into this.
Well, thank you. It is a team effort. So.
Councilmember Ford.
Thank you, everyone, for the presentation. And I know we've had some conversations offline about some of the concerns that I've been getting from folks in the community, particularly folks who are on the other end of Lake Willow Road. And I know that we're going to eventually have some more global conversations, because folks, when you cross over 40, going on the other end by Carolina Pines and Tryon Road, have some other concerns about how traffic is going to be handled in that part of Lake Wheeler, as well as moving down the corridor. So I'm definitely looking forward to some of the engagement when the new consultant comes on board, because certainly this provides a snapshot of Lake Wheeler Road on the Dix end of the corridor, but there seems to be quite a bit of concern by community members on the other end of Lake Wheeler Road that we still have to address.
Councilmember Cox.
Yes, I was wondering what the plan is for funding the project, because this is not part of the 2017 transportation bond.
Deputy City Manager Tansy Hayward's going to come forward and help us with that question.
Councilmember Cox, thank you for the question. So as was shared in the presentation, the council did advance funding last year to start design. At this point, we do have an estimate included in the proposed allocations that you'll be considering further in the park bond that would allow this project to proceed on the timeline that was discussed in this presentation. So the council has not yet taken action on that, but it is on the list of projects for consideration for the park bond.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, staff. I appreciate the presentation and enjoyed seeing Sandy Forks Road pictured there, which is in District A, I think one of the coolest streetscapes in the entire city. But on a related different topic, I'm growing concerned that we're not going to have sufficient parking for Dix Park. And I know we've heard in some of these rezoning cases various discussions or what I'd call good faith commitments, but as far as I can remember, we didn't get any rezoning conditions that would be enforceable to require shared parking. Could someone on the staff update us on where those rezonings are and whether the shared parking is going to be delivered, and if not, what we might do about that?
Councilmember, thank you for the question. We have a number of folks here in the auditorium today. I can't speak exactly to where the rezonings are, but I can tell you that we have had conversations with a couple of the developers about building extra capacity into some of the garages that they would incorporate in the development. So those conversations are ongoing. Don't have anything concrete to report now, but we can certainly come back to you with that report in the future.
Thank you. I would like to get a follow-up report when there's something to report. But let's keep that on the radar. That's an important part of the success for the park, and look forward to hearing back on that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Knight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a real quick statement. Yeah, and I appreciate the work that's going into this. I know it's been a lot, and I appreciate you working with the stakeholders in this, the neighbors, as well as those interested in the development of Dix Park. I do, you've heard this before, but certainly for me, I implore you to do as best you can to get this project done in alignment with the opening of Dix, the Dix, excuse me, Plaza and Play Park, and so that will merge and meld together well as much as you can, at least at the one end that we can get traffic to and fro there at the beginning. So I appreciate y'all's work on that, and I know y'all keep pushing this project forward to help everybody involved. Thanks.
Michael, could you update everybody on the schedule?
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask Kenneth Ritchie to come back and he can share that with us.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor. So we are currently under some initial design efforts with the consultant. We brought them on to really start coordinating with Duke Energy to get some design concepts so we can try and make sure we get that infrastructure location pinned down as it relates to both the Lake Wheeler project and the Plaza Play project. We are looking at design completing and construction starting summer of next year. So that would roughly be about an 18-month design completion time frame. And then right now estimating about 2 years for construction, which would have us completing summer of 2025. So there would be right now about a year overlap of the construction of Lake Wheeler Road and the opening of the Play Plaza.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff or comments? Councilmember Buffkin?
Thanks, Mayor. While we got Mr. Ritchie here talking about the schedule, but are there any opportunities to reduce that delivery time?
So we're working with the consultant to try and identify everything we can, but the biggest concern we just have is going to be the timing with regards to the Duke relocations and the Duke infrastructure because of the lead times that we have to provide for materials for them. But certainly we are trying to work this as fast as we can.
There's a lot of complications involved with the schedule, and staff went over that with the Dix Leadership Committee at our last meeting. And while I think there were some members frustrated, they also walked away with a much better understanding of where we are, and that if we were to meet the schedule, we probably should have started this process 4 years ago. So that is where we are, and I just want to thank the staff for their good work. Thank you. I don't see anybody else's hand raised. So I'm assuming that we are done for today. I want to thank everybody for being here, and we will see you next week. Thank you.